When the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris caught fire, the world knew within minutes, but it's taken much longer for news of devastating fires in Brazil's Amazon rainforest to make headlines. Since January, the so-called lungs of the earth have been filling with the smoke of 73,000 wildfires.
The rainforests of the Amazon produce 20% of the Earth's oxygen and absorb millions of tonnes of carbon dioxide every year. Fires are common in the dry season, but this year has seen an 83% increase compared to the same period last year. In fact, it's the highest number of blazes since records began in 2013. Conservationists say many of these fires have been deliberately lit to clear land for livestock, that farmers and loggers have been emboldened by Brazil's right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro, who took office in January with plans to ramp up farming and mining in the region. But Mr Bolsonaro has blamed not-for-profit organisations, accusing them of lighting the fires to make him look bad.
Regarding the fires in the Amazon, I am under the impression that it could have been set by the NGOs because they had asked for money. What was their intention? To bring about problems for Brazil.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called the burning of the Amazon an international crisis. About half of Brazil's indigenous population live in the rainforest, and they are spearheading the fight to save it.
It's destruction.
For
this forest, I will go on until my last drop of blood.
City dwellers are feeling the effects too. The city of Sao Paulo, more than 2,500 kilometres away from the fire, spent Monday in darkness, the blackout caused by a thick blanket of smoke.
And joining us to discuss the situation in Brazil is Distinguished Professor from the Centre for Tropical, Environmental and Sustainability Science at James Cook University, Bill Laurence. G'day, Bill. How are you?
Good, Helen.
Very good.
Ellen,
now, why is this happening? And either will do. I answer to both. Why is this happening? In the 2000s, at the turn of the century, there was a huge problem with the burning of the rainforests, and I thought that had been turned around. What's gone on?
Yeah, well, yeah, when I lived there in the 1990s and 2000s, they were destroying an area of tropical forest in Brazil about the size of Belgium every year, which is horrendous. You know, it's 3 times the size of our wet tropics World Heritage Area up here.
3 times the size of the World Tropics up in far north Queensland every year?
Yeah, every year, yeah.
Wow.
An incredible onslaught of forest destruction. Then a bunch of things happened. A Catholic nun was murdered in the Amazon who was trying to protect indigenous people. That really helped to humanize the struggle. Brazil, the president sent in the army. There was a big crackdown on illegal logging and illegal deforestation. And, you know, beginning about 2006, we saw deforestation rates drop a lot. And in fact, 75 or 80% reduction in deforestation, which is really regarded as a victory for Brazil, and many people thought that that was going to be the status quo.
Okay, and so enter the president that you like to call the tropical Trump. Who is he and how has he contributed to this in your view?
Well, it's pretty hard not to point the finger at Jair Bolsonaro. And he is, the longer I watch him, the more Trump-like he becomes. I mean, one of the things he did a couple weeks ago, Brazil's National Space Agency, which is a very esteemed institution and in fact has had some of the best deforestation data of any country in the world, announced the latest and really alarming deforestation figures, and Bolsonaro just came out and just said it was a bunch of lies. And the head of the space agency, lies, absolutely. And the head of the space agency called him out on it, and he was fired. And now, you know, with this crazy, I mean, you know, there's lots of hallucinogenic substances in the Amazon rainforest, and one almost wonders if Bolsonaro isn't sampling some of them, because the kinds of things that he's saying, you know, like the non-governmental groups will be out there lighting the fires because they want to get some more money or something like that. I mean, it's just beyond, you know, ludicrous, and it's well, as I said, Trump-like in its wackiness.
Yeah, Peter?
Is it popular? Is what he's saying popular with the Brazilian people?
I think a lot of Brazilians are getting very worried about this, and you know, his numbers, as I understand it, run kind of like Trump's, which he's got sort of a core constituency of people that like him, but there's a lot of people that just don't know. And I mean, Brazil's had some bad politics in the last decade. You know, a recent president is in prison now for corruption. They're tired of a lot of things, and he's come in making a lot of promises. But you know, one of the things that he said was that, you know, he was going to unleash the force of development on the Amazon and in Brazil. And I think that people have been, you know, those are political words, but when you actually see him taking place, where he's gutting the Environmental Protection Agency, where he's essentially giving carte blanche permission for illegal land clearers and land robbers and land speculators and cattle ranchers and others to go out and just destroy the forest, where he's trying to undercut the legal enforcement and the judiciary. And clearly this is having an effect. I mean, this is what seems to be happening. So, you know, when someone has that powerful of a bully pulpit and they're saying, go for it, you know, open it up to the mines, to the dams, to the roads, to the logging, to the cattle ranching, to the fires, that kind of thing plays out, and that's what we're seeing right now is, you know, the world's biggest rainforest.
Take me back to the science of it. I mean, you're going there in the next little while to give a paper and also to join in some science that's been done by scientists from around the world, including the Smithsonian, where you used to be. What is that showing? Because always the fear with the Amazon is that somehow that vast forest, you get to some sort of tipping point at which you get a sudden decline in the amount of rainforest and then a sudden impact in terms of the world's carbon situation.
Yeah, that's a good question. This is one of the big things that we're really worried about is this. The Amazon produces a lot of its own rainfall. So the rainfall that falls on the forest much of it gets recycled right back up into the atmosphere through just the normal process of plant photosynthesis as water vapor. And that creates clouds, and those clouds are really critical for keeping the Amazon wet enough so it doesn't burn in the dry season, but also reflecting a lot of heat back up into outer space. But as you chop down more of the forest, you lose that water vapor. And so the big question is, what's going to happen to the Amazon? When is there a critical threshold? And current studies, you know, these are hard things to put a precise number on, but current studies suggest that 25 or 30% of the forest destruction might be enough to sort of turn off this natural water cycling phenomenon, which is critical to the survival of the Amazon basin. Okay. So that's one of the big things that has scientists very worried.
Lee, talk to me about our perception of risk. You know, we were talking about that with the universities just before, Lee, how we perceive risk, you know. So we see Notre Dame burning and we're rightly, you know, alarmed by that. And yet here we have Bill telling us that it's 73,000 bushfires burning across the Amazon, a fifth of the world's oxygen. Why is that so difficult for us to engage with, do you think?
Well,
let's put that one to Lee. Let's put that one to Lee, Bill.
Okay.
You know, I don't know the full answer to that question, unfortunately. I think when you look at the stats and you look at the data, everyone should be alarmed about this. The Amazon rainforest is in flames. It is a massive carbon sink. It is a home to, you know, almost 1 million Indigenous peoples whose human rights are being abused right now. You're absolutely right that Bolsonaro is Brazil's answer to Trump. And you see this massive risk in terms of what this could mean for climate justice, in terms of what this could mean for our future and global sustainability. We know that one of the key answers, really, to climate change is that we take better care of our mountains and our rivers and our forests. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing a populist leader who's using NGOs, human rights defenders, as scapegoats for the fact that he's promised that he's going to open the Amazon up for business. And it seems like that is exactly what's happening. But what is happening as well is a massive environmental destruction, not to talk about the impact on animal life and biodiversity and Indigenous peoples in this sphere. You know, it's hard, I think, for people who are passionate about the climate and passionate about human rights to see something like this happen and not understand why so many people haven't even heard about it and why we're not, you know, marching down the streets right now calling for better climate action.
Has something changed, Amanda? I mean, this is a guy who came out and he said, I used to be called Captain Chainsaw. Now I am Nero. Remember the Nero fiddling while Rome's burned? He says, now I am Nero, but setting the Amazon aflame. You know, when politicians used to say things like that, or if they would tell lies and then they were caught out, they'd kind of be ashamed and they'd be in trouble. Now it seems if you say that, you seem strong even though it's kind of not true, or it's uncivil, or it's ridiculous?
Well, it's been quite some time since we've had politicians, all politicians, be ethically, you could say, good, strong, ethical character and strong leaders. I think in the state of fear, and a lot of countries are fearful, so we're looking at, you talk about Trump-like and things like that. A lot of people are voting for presidents and prime ministers and so forth because they fear their circumstance, what's going to happen to our country. And I think this is a perfect example that whoever lit this, whoever's caused this, is inciting fear. Now the country is going to be, what are we going to do? People are worried about the environment, people are globally are worried, and that is gold in a politician's hand. So if someone's fearing their life and fearing their environment and fearing their country, I said, I can fix this, I know who did it, and so forth. So whether he did it or not, this is political, diamonds essentially. But what worries me, there are people there. There are humans. So whoever's done this, you are risking people's lives for a political stance or for just for the sake of doing it. I'd love that whoever did it gets exposed. Yeah. But they actually love this type of propaganda or these dramatic situations because people in fear are people that can be easily manipulated.
And what's the, do you think, Bill, the role for the planet? When you have these systemic issues, there's a system, there's a government system, you've got the Brazilian government, then you've got the international system. Like, we should value the Amazon just in terms of carbon emissions and so forth, and the way in which it can be a carbon sink. Then we've got trading systems we'd have to sort out that, they want to sell more beef to the Europeans because they're about to do a trade deal with the Europeans. Is there something about systemic issues that just overwhelms us?
It's tough. I mean, I think, the comments about risk are important too. One of the things that we've really found is that, firstly, we've got to remember in all of these conversations, and we really work all over the world in different developing countries, and these are sovereign nations. And so one of the first things that we've got to really say up front is, look, these are sovereign nations and they've got the right to do with their own countries and their own natural resources what they want. And once we sort of get that out of the way, then the question becomes, what's smart development, what's sustainable development, what's equitable, what's fair? And one of the things that we really argue about, and I think it's absolutely true, is there is an avalanche of projects, and we've seen this in Brazil with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of taxpayers' money being stolen, secreted away, ripped off by politicians. We're seeing this again and again and again around the world where a lot of big development projects are being advocated by a small number of actors. There's a few people that are getting very wealthy, including certain politicians and certain land developers. And the people in the country, the large majority of the people, are falling behind, or they're just getting ripped off, they're losing their natural resources. And so that's the note we try to strike a lot is yes, Brazilians do care about what the world thinks, but I think also we try to say to them, look, this is not in your best economic interest, short-term or long-term, and Sao Paulo right now looks like, how Sydney looked when it was covered by one of those massive dust storms. It's covered in darkness. Brazilians are actually getting very afraid that their water supply may collapse in places like, down south, Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, because most of that comes from the Amazon. So I think if we can play up the actual interests of those people as much as possible and provide them with good, solid information. The comment that I believe it was Amanda made about the risk and the perception and the notion that certain kinds of politicians can exploit that, I think is just so true. We see that in many cases, is that people fear immigration or economic growth or whatever, and certain types of people make promises and they get elected and they're not always good leaders at all.
Well, thanks for that, Bill, and come back and tell us about the science when you finish doing those field studies in the next few weeks. Appreciate your time. Bill Laurence is a distinguished research professor at James Cook University in Cairns.